Mrs. Awashika, the civil service in Nigeria, because whether it is NIPC or NEPC or Nexim Bank, all the CSE, you're going to deal with civil servants because these are government agencies. So how do we reform? And what type of reforms do you want to see very quickly in the civil service that will fast-track ease of doing business?
The people who sit as civil servants mostly have never been in private sector before. So the guy who has to take decisions or who has to interact with you in terms of your business is not coming from an experiential position, and his approach, his attitude, his understanding of the issues at stake are quite low, and that affects his ability to deliver. So we've got a manpower problem. We have to define the kind of people who would take care of those segments of the public service that relate to business. Because if you do not have the understanding of what is at stake in terms of business in itself, your ability to do the right things that will support the business would be weak. Now, I'd like us to also look at another thing concerning this conversation. We've limited ease of doing business essentially to the interaction of the private sector with public sector in terms of registration of this or that and all of that. And it's beyond that. The business that we do is more than our registrations. Yes, we're all used to suffering through it one way or the other, and it would be beautiful for us to have an efficient system, but that's only stage one. Now, for us to do business easily, sustainably, and quickly in our country, there are many other things that we must deal with, which is my point about having an holistic view of the entire system. If we don't have the right kind of manpower development, it will affect the public service, it will affect the private sector. So our education system in itself needs to be reviewed in terms of developing the right kind of manpower for all the sectors of the economy that we do want to develop. There's no point me setting up a manufacturing facility when I cannot find the kind of technical skill that I need to drive it. I don't need a graduate of political science, of geography, or physics, or anything if he doesn't have the skill that I need. So ultimately, what we're doing, because we're not taking care of these things, we're creating problems for ourselves and for our investors. For ourselves, because we allow people to come into our country to invest, but we also allow them to take all the value out by bringing all the manpower that is required because we do not have the right manpower. And then we have all the unemployment issues that we have. And we also create problems for them because ultimately, the cost of doing that business because of their increased cost of manpower affects the viability of the business on the long run, and it drags things on. So we shouldn't narrow it to all of those processes, which is why the responsibility of Ministry of Trade, Investment and Industry covers a lot of those fundamental things, but it is beyond that. There has to be that collaboration between Dr. Enelama's ministry, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Mines and Power, all the ministries that have any kind of interaction with business. And there must be a holistic plan, a national plan that affects how businesses will operate in Nigeria and all the factors that will touch it and that would help to make it easier so businesses can have a better opportunity to survive and do better, and better investments can be attracted into the country.
How quickly do you think the government should ramp up on this process of ease of doing business? Kenya says 5 years, they're looking at moving up to 50 double digits. Do you think we can get something done in the next 3-4 years? What targets do you think we should set for ourselves?
My view, again, starts from the premise that I believe a lot of these things have already been conceptualized, articulated, and to a large extent, the framework has been put in place. I think what is most critical is the software to actually get things running the way they're supposed to run. So I think it's more around, in my view, having stakeholders, in this case, across the board, whether it is the executive arm of government, the legislative arm of government, the private sector, having everybody come together and let's agree that, look, we want to move the country from, what's our current ranking now in the ease of doing business? I mean, I don't want to depress myself, so I don't check. But, you know, whatever that figure, 169, yes, let us agree this week, next week, that, look, you know what? On the eve of this government handing over, we would have moved to, pick a number, 50, all right? Let's pick a number, and then let us agree that these are the things. we need to do. The legislature, maybe take a break from budget padding for a change and then just focus maybe on doing, sorry, I hope there's no legislature in the room. But on a serious note, let the legislature play an oversight role around ensuring that what we say we will do, we are actually doing. Every government agency, I believe, has a committee in the legislature that oversees it, right? Let them play that role. Let that be their own job. Let the executive focus on delivering on the program management aspect.
May I question very quickly there? Honorable Minister, a very quick question to you from what we're hearing. We had an interaction from the executive branch with the legislative branch since we started this ease of doing business processes and reviewing things?
The good news is that there is serious interest from the National Assembly on ease of doing business as well. In fact, they ran a number of sessions and panels on this, and we've certainly had some discussions on it. Now, they do play an oversight role anyway, so they will do that. But I would say that, like, in terms of the system that we're setting up, being able to run, just like the Rwanda experience, it has to be a complete system. It has to run. In other words, this presidential council, working with the secretariat, has to be able to deliver the results. And whether it's then the executive, National Assembly, calling for sort of consultations to know how things are going, or even when we engage the private sector, as we will inevitably do, those all become part of communication, part of reporting, part of accountability. But there is no question that we intend to work with the legislative houses. Let me also say that the things we can do that do not require change in the laws are priority one, right? So that we don't spend the next 3 months telling you we are waiting for National Assembly. I think that would not be wise. Having said that, as we go on, there are things that will inevitably require legislative change, and we will certainly follow up on those as well.